Welcome to Deep Work Out Loud, the thinking that fuels our life, our work, and our leadership. I'm Julie Harris Oliver. This is the podcast where I sit with another professional coach and we do some work around a single concept, an idea, a piece of inspiration, a topic, something we've seen come up in coaching. If we're really lucky while we're talking about it, we might get a minute or two of what coaching might look and feel like. But we'll see how this goes. It's all an experiment. With any luck, you'll leave with something you can apply and use in your work or your life or both. Today, I'm here with Dr. Matt Kodsi. Matt comes from a background that makes him an ideal coach for executives in a number of industries, both inside and outside of healthcare. After 17 years as a practicing neurologist, Dr. Kodsi took on the role of Chief Medical Officer. He brings what he learned through implementation of an electronic medical record, the COVID pandemic, and a number of other challenges to work with executives as they navigate their own professional journey and build the bridges that will take them further along in their professional path. He also has a background in theater and has recently rediscovered this love, and that is how I know he is my people. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Julie. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. Now, before we dig in, what was your journey to becoming a coach?
So it's interesting, Julie, and I've had this conversation with a few people, and the more I've thought about it, a light bulb went on for me that coaching really, for me, has been more of a rediscovery than a discovery. You mentioned my involvement in theater. That goes back more years than I care to count. And it really stemmed from a fascination with why people make the decisions they do, what motivates them to take action, what they're thinking, what's going on in their head. And that fascination led me to my neurology practice in medicine for 17 years, and now has led me to the next stage for me, which is the coaching work, because it's a very similar interest. Why do people make these decisions? What are they thinking? What are the stories they're telling themselves? So I really look at it as a rediscovery.
It is also related. I remember having that thought during training of, wait a minute, we covered this in acting training. This is all very similar. It's, the human condition and motivation, all the things you said. So what did you bring for us to dig into today?
So Julie, I think the biggest sort of eye-opening lesson for me in the coaching training was about presence. So I'd like to talk a little bit about presence today.
Great. What does that mean for you?
So when I think about presence, I really look at it as two different types. There is the standard presence that we talk about all the time in coaching, which is being present for our clients, being there, being focused, really listening to what they say and listening for what they don't say as well. And when I look at that, I think about that as an external presence, being present for others. I think in addition to that, there is what I look at as an internal presence. One of the things that we learned at Hudson together was that you really can't take the client any further than you've taken yourself. So if we're going to be present for our clients and listening to them and really hearing them, then before we can do that, I think we have to be internally present to ourselves. We have to know what drives us, what motivates us, what stories we're telling ourselves outside of coaching and during coaching sessions. Really having a deeper understanding of ourselves before we can work with a client to help them better understand themselves.
So how did you find that presence? Was that new for you?
It's interesting because I think I have always looked at myself as being a very introspective person. Take time to reflect, look inside, think about things. Yet I still got trapped in the same sort of, I think the term rat race, well, that's an older term, that everyone else does. I will tell you, Julie, you didn't know me a few years back, but many people knew me as the ultimate multitasker. I rarely focused on one thing at a time, let alone focused on myself. And so although I thought I was present both for myself and for others, I really discovered that I was present for neither.
Because you were so busy in your head.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the same thing. Like I remember when I was working, I would go all day. I wouldn't start to process a single thing until I laid my head down to sleep. And then the whole day would come rushing back to me and then keep me up all night. I do my day twice, mostly filled with recriminations and regret about things that I said because I was just going too fast?
I found that I was either thinking, I was never, let's say never. I thought that I was focused on the moment when I was in meetings and in conversations, but really my brain was probably 30% thinking about the meeting I just had, probably 20 to 30% thinking about the meeting I was in. And let's do the math there. Hold on. That's going to be, so then about 40 to 50%, yes, thinking about the meeting I was going to have next or all the other things I had to do the rest of it. So what coaching has shown me is that it was an illusion that I was fooling myself. And it's amazing how many of us live in that world and don't realize what we're missing. Not only in interactions with others, but interacting with ourselves and understanding ourselves.
Because you're not even there, really.
Right. And the challenge, the real problem is that going at that pace, in a sense, is rewarding. We talk about, for example, I'll tell you something that I had read recently that I had not thought about until I saw it in print. One of the things that I did was I considered myself incredibly responsive.
Mhm.
And so if I got a text from someone in the hospital, I mean, it was immediate. I could be in a meeting. I could be in a conversation with my wife. I hate to admit it. And I would immediately look at the text and respond
Mhm.
because I felt like that's what I needed to do. What I didn't think about was the fact that that quick response actually activates what are called the reward circuits, in a sense, in the brain, which if you really dig deep, they're the same circuits that are activated by drugs like cocaine.
So what you're saying is multitasking is cocaine. That's what I'm hearing.
In a way it is. And in a way it is just as addictive. We don't realize we quickly respond, we get a hit. And that makes us feel good. So we continue to respond in that fashion because there's a positive feedback. And you don't realize until you're out of that loop that you were in it.
Well, as you said, it felt rewarding, and I think also rewarded, right? Like what? And you said something about how you prided yourself in returning those texts immediately. Like, what was the story you told yourself about your identity, about being that responsive?
It's a bit of a mixed bag for me. I mean, I felt like my role when I was in the chief medical officer role, especially if you think about during the COVID pandemic, was to provide support so that everyone else in the hospital, the physicians, the nurses, et cetera, that they could get their jobs done. So I was there to support them. So if I'm there to support that, in my mind, if they need me right away.
And I imagine it was that time of crisis. And then that crisis went on for a really long time. And then I imagine you're really addicted to that. Because when things start to slow down, how are you getting that dopamine hit?
Right. You continue to behave it. You continue, and there's a balance. I mean, there are times when someone needs you. It's rare. My coach said to me, and he was right. I mean, I wasn't involved in direct patient care. So it's not like someone was calling me because a patient needed medication or a patient was crashing. They needed an answer to a question. They needed to figure out how to do something. That wasn't immediate. Didn't need to wait an hour, but it didn't have to be instantaneous.
So what do you think you lost by not being really present in those times?
It's interesting when you ask me that question because the thing that comes to mind is I had a 360 done when I took on an executive coach who was chief medical officer. And that was actually about 2 years into my role. So I've been doing the job for a while. And that 360 brought out a lot of comments about, hey, we know Dr. Kodsi cares. We know he's here for us. I'm just never really sure if he was paying attention.
Ooh.
Yeah, that hurt.
So then how did you change that? Or did you?
Well, that's the question. I think what I did was at that time was I made sure to talk to the people who had answered the 360 and let them know that I was aware that was an issue and asked them, please feel free to call me out on it because I wanted to be paying attention. I wanted them to know that I was focused, although I still wasn't in the end. I believed I was focused, but I wasn't. So you asked me, what did I lose? I lost the relationships. I mean, I still had them, but they weren't what they could have been.
So were you able to make that switch while you were working? Or did you make it look more like you had that while you were working?
I think it's a 50-50. I made it a little bit, but I didn't make it enough to really understand what I was doing.
So what clicked for you?
When I went to, so as a precursor for the coaching training program, I went to something called Life Forward. Do you know Life Forward?
Mm.
And it's a 4-day program. I don't know about your experience, but for mine, I walked in and I thought, really? 4 days? Really?
What are we doing?
But it was amazing because I think we all came in ready to make ourselves vulnerable. And I was at a point where I was burning out from the chief medical officer work. And I was trying to figure out what's next. And I think a lot of us went there and thought, okay, we're vested. We're going to do whatever it takes to figure out what the next step is. So it's probably one of the first times I had truly opened myself up and made myself completely vulnerable.
Mm.
And that provided sort of the fertile ground for growth.
And what did that look like?
What allowed myself to take a step back and look at where I'd been and where I wanted to go and who I wanted to be. And that's when I started to see the change that needed to happen and the change that I wanted to happen.
So then how did you make that change? Or did you? I don't want to assume, but you seem pretty present these days.
It was challenging at that time. I was still working. So I was working up until November of 24. I stepped down from the role and didn't finish the coaching training until February, March of 25. So I did decrease how quickly I responded, not in a bad way in a sense. I still was there to provide support, but it wasn't as immediate. It wasn't as instantaneous. But yet at the same time, I'll tell you, Julie, I don't think I really fully changed, or at least nearly fully changed, until I stepped down from the job. Until I took a second to sort of breathe fresh air and really take a minute to be introspective.
Hmm.
Now I'll throw another one at you. Although did you have a question?
Well, I was just thinking it from if you're working with executives who are currently working and aren't about to step down from their role and do something else, and yet need to figure out presence. How do you work with them on that?
This as with any coaching conversation or coaching engagement, the goal really is for the client to get where they want to be. And so I think there's two sides to that question, or to answering that question. If someone doesn't want to change, is happy with where they are, then it's incredibly challenging to work with them in a way that will help them have more presence.
Hmm.
At the same time, part of the way I look at coaching work is to ask the client where they want to be. And then they may not realize or see the barriers or the behaviors that are keeping them from getting there. So part of our job as coaches, and as we've said at Hudson, is to make the unseen seen. So to help them or to work with them so that they're able to see the things that they're doing that really are impeding them from getting to where they want to be and from being who they want to be. And Hudson opened my eyes to see that. And so I did make changes. I think, and I said to my wife, it's funny, actually, the person who took my role is now retiring. And we joke the job is posted, although I will not.
Already?
It's a long story. And so I have said to her, I would be a very, very different leader today than I was a year and a half ago.
Were you tempted to go back?
No.
Okay.
I'm not. But I am certainly tempted to help those who are still in that world. I mean, that's the goal, is to, what's the word, in a sense, we build walls and we build bridges, is the way I think about it. And unfortunately, we often build more walls. And working with a client is opening their eyes so that they can see the stones that they have used to build those walls, to basically get in their own way, so that they can then take that wall apart, brick by brick, and use those same stones to build a bridge. And they use that bridge to cross over to be the person they want to be.
That's such a lovely metaphor. And also, speaking as a patient, I want my doctor fully present. And so many times you go in and they're thinking about who knows what, but except you, if you could have their attention for a full however many minutes they can give you. It's such a different experience than someone who's flying by and making notes and making decisions when you not necessarily you even feel seen.
Very much so. On that front, you've asked me what's opened my eyes and what's changed me. There's another experience where I was a patient. So, I joked with my friends. I said, don't step down from your job because bad things happen. Well, about 2 months after I stepped down from my chief medical officer position, I started to have back pain. Who doesn't have back pain? They got dramatically worse over a course of several weeks, and turned out it was a cancer. It was lymphoma that was growing in one of my back nodes. And so I had an opportunity to see the world from the other side and to be in the hospital, chemo, inpatient treatment, other things. And I will tell you, if there's one thing that helps you appreciate the value of presence and presence for every moment, is when you have an occasion where you're not sure how many moments you'll have left.
I feel like we should say that you're through it and you're fine.
Yes, I should say that. So how far out now? Oh my gosh, time flies. Last chemo was in April. So 8 months out of chemo and 7 months out of radiation. So as far as we hear from the oncologist, it is done. He considers me cured.
Wonderful.
So thank God, lymphoma is incredibly treatable. So
Okay.
I was very lucky.
Yeah.
Very, very lucky.
Wonderful.
It reminds me, and I thought about this today, knowing we were going to be talking. There's a quote that I've heard. It's attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, but I think of it because I saw it in Kung Fu Panda. And if you've seen the movie, there is a time where the turtle says, "Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift." And that is why it's called the present.
Yeah.
So true. And the word applies to presence. Being present, both for yourself and for others, it's a gift. It's a privilege.
So just talking from a practical standpoint, how do you cultivate that? Because I know it's hard. And we talked about the reasons why it's hard? Why is it so hard?
Because there's a million other things going on. It depends on which part. Are you talking about the internal presence, the external presence, or both?
It's the everything, everywhere, all at once of it all.
We'll continue with our movie references.
Yeah.
The internal presence for many people is challenging because some people are afraid of what they'll find if they dig too deep. Some people have never allowed themselves to dig deep and they just don't know where to start. And so both of those make it difficult. The external presence is hard because, as we were saying, there are a million things going on in our lives. And to turn all of that off so that you can truly be there for someone, that's challenging.
It's hard.
It is, I will say, it is as rewarding as it is challenging.
And so if you were to take step one of how to start to make the switch, what would you do?
If someone really wants to know how present they are, ask. Ask those closest to you. Ask your significant other. Ask your family, your kids if they're old enough. Ask the people close to you. They're going to tell you the truth. The answers may surprise you. They may not. They may just validate things you already knew, but were too hesitant to admit to yourself. Of course, make sure you let them know that you want the unvarnished truth, not the polished, nice version.
Like, it is safe to tell me the answer to this question.
Because the first step, as with any change, is self-awareness. If you can't see it in yourself, then you're not going to be able to change it.
So what changed for you once you were able to start practicing being more present?
It's interesting. There's so many things. One is, relationships. Yeah, I will tell you, I brought my wife up earlier, and if she were here, she would agree with me because we've had this conversation. There came a time where she just didn't tell me about her day because she told me, and I didn't realize this. She told me this was probably just a few months ago when we were talking about presence again. She said, the problem was, I've already told you I'd answer those texts right away. So she would start talking and I would be on my phone. Or she would be telling me a story and I would say, oh, I have to call. And she appreciated, she knew that I had to do it. She didn't resent the fact that I was busy at the hospital, but she just felt like, well, it's not worth it. It's not worth having the conversation. So
Man,
our relationship has changed dramatically.
how was that to hear?
It was tough. It's tough because that's not the person you want to be. It's not who I wanted to be. And I didn't realize it was having that impact. And that's just part of the fact that we fool ourselves. We talk about how we tell ourselves stories and we make assumptions. Well, sometimes those stories allow us to continue the behavior that we're already doing, and that behavior that's getting in our own way.
And I know that your family and your marriage is the most important thing in your whole world. So I can imagine how devastating that was to hear and how motivating it was. People like, oh, I'm fixing this.
Now, I remember the first thing I did, and it's funny, I hadn't thought about this in a long time. The first thing I did when I came home from Life Forward was I apologized to my wife. We sat down and I just said, I'm sorry. I did not realize all the things I was doing that were getting in the way.
She was probably like, worth every penny.
She said that. She did. She said it was worth the cost.
Yeah, amazing. So what does your day-to-day life look like now that you're in it?
It is much less busy,
Mm-hmm.
which I am truly enjoying. I'm in the early stages of building the coaching practice, so not a lot of clients right now. I do cherish the time that I have with clients. I've already said that how I look at presence as a privilege, as really a gift. So that time that I can share that space with the clients it's just amazing. It's just incredible and so valuable. And when I'm not sharing it with the clients, I'm sharing it with my family and getting all the things done that we hadn't done in the house in several years. Catching up.
Do you have a practice that helps you drop into that space?
I take, I would say a few minutes. It varies from a few to 10 to 15. And I remind myself of exactly what I just said. What a privilege it is to be in this space. What my role is as the coach is to hear the things they're saying, hear the things they're not, ask them the questions that they're not asking themselves, the things that they haven't thought of, but challenge the way they see things now to allow them to step back and maybe see things differently. So I think about all of that and the opportunities that come from that before I start a session.
Now, if you were back in your job as chief medical officer and I remember how booked your calendar was. In order to book a group meeting with you, we had to book 4 months out. It was crazy. If you were back in that role, how do you think you would behave differently in that role? What would that Matt look like?
One of the things I was really bad at was delegating. And I think in that way, I did not help other people grow.
Hmm.
So I think probably one of the major changes would be less doing for and maybe a little more doing with and a little more allowing people to do for themselves. They knew that they had a safe place to land,
Mm-hmm.
that if things didn't go well, they could always come back. But we feel it's easier often to just do it ourselves. So we do it.
I think we forget so often once you're in that role, your whole job is making everybody else better.
And I looked at my whole job as being there to support them. But my definition of support was probably doing more than I should have.
Let me take it off your plate. Let me make it easier for everybody.
Yeah.
And how do you think your attention would be different now?
It is challenging because keeping in mind that in that job, I barely left my chair because it was Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting. I think what I would do would be to work to change the culture.
Oh,
Because if we don't change the system, then the system doesn't reinforce that sort of presence.
I'm going to push back on you a little bit.
Go ahead.
Knowing the part that you could control would be you. Would you be present differently in those meetings And not having 3 meetings at the same time.
Yes. So, let me qualify that. I would absolutely be more present than I was before. There's no doubt. It's who I am now. Keep in mind that the way the system is constructed, if I am that present in meetings and conversations, then I really can't sleep. Because the amount of work that I would take home would be all consuming.
It would all pile up for the end of the day.
So that's why I say it's 2 parts. I absolutely would be more present. I think it is also necessary to work on the system to allow people to be more present so and the work still gets done. And that's true in so many industries. It's not like we need 10 hours to have conversations that we didn't have before. Is that the conversations need to be more meaningful. But for them to be more meaningful, we need to find ways of distributing the work. And that brings to mind, I'll tell you, there's a book I read recently, written by a coach that I actually work with at Medi Leadership. His name is Michael Heim. It's Shifting Towards Unorthodoxy. It's a great book. And in it, he talks about the complex world we work in and how complexity demands a different type of leadership. And the term he uses is distributed leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have just one leader doing all the work. You have everyone contributing to leadership, everyone doing the work. In a sense, everyone having ownership, which creates not only sort of a greater distribution so that one person doesn't have all the burden on their shoulders, it also creates a greater sense of belonging within the group and within the organization.
And purpose, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious when you talked about changing the system. I've been in systems where even the most senior leaders felt powerless to change the system. And I remember thinking at the time, like, if you don't have any power, how does anybody have any power? How do you look at systemic change and how that has to happen? I mean, this is a whole different podcast, but just in a sentence.
I will tell you, I made some of those efforts and they were indeed challenging. And I can't say that I changed much, but I would say, I feel like if you ask the people at the hospital, what I changed was the culture. And it starts there. If everyone feels supported, if everyone knows that they have each other's back, then it creates a different interaction. And then that breeds a type of success, an environment that becomes infectious. Because to your point, the one leader, no matter how powerful they are, unless I guess they're the CEO of the entire company, even then, one person can't make the change. It has to be everyone working together to make it.
And I was thinking as you were saying that, you're really speaking to psychological safety as a baseline.
True.
Okay, these are all topics for another day. What would you leave us with about presence?
I think, and I know I've said it a few times already, it is creating a mindset to see presence not as a must do or a need to do or even a to do. It is a privilege. It is something that is given to us, an opportunity to interact with others in a way that is so meaningful and creates exponentially stronger relationships. That if we just take a second and see it that way, then we'll start asking ourselves, why am I not doing this? Rather than, why should I do this?
It's so simple, and yet it's not easy.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Julie. It's been a pleasure.
This has been Deep Work Out Loud. I'm Julie Harris Oliver. I'd like to thank Matt Kodsi for joining the podcast. You can find him at bridgingjourneyscoaching.com. If any of this resonates with you, please subscribe and leave a review at all the podcast places. And if you'd like to work with me, you can find me at julieharrisoliver.com. And let me leave you with this. What might it look like for you to bring just a little more presence into your day? Be especially present for just one meeting, one conversation. Okay, try some things, report back. Thanks for listening. See you next time.